Welcome to Senate Committee on Revenue and Economic Development. I would like to call this meeting to order. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Senator Dennis.
Here.
Senator Ratty.
Here.
Senator Kiekeffer.
Here.
Senator Sievers-Gansert.
Here.
Chair Neal.
Thank you for that. It looks like all members are present and we have a quorum. So before we begin, I would like to explain how virtual committee meetings will work, since this is a new process for all of us. As you know, the legislative building is currently closed to the public. So all committee meetings will be held virtually, meaning committee members, staff, and everyone else will participate either through Zoom, video conference, or by telephone. However, there are various ways members of the public can engage with us and participate through the process. As in previous sessions, all committee-related information is available on NELIS, which is the Nevada Electronic Legislative Information System, and which is accessible on the legislator's website. There are 4 ways to engage with this committee. These include registering to participate in the committee meeting through the new system on NELIS, which places you in line to testify on a bill or provide public comment during the meeting. Submitting written testimony to the committee via email address or fax number as listed on the revenue agenda. Sharing your opinion via the legislature's opinion application on NELIS, or viewing committee meetings through NELIS or on the legislator's YouTube channel. During the 2021 legislative session, to testify on a bill or provide public comment, members of the public must first register for the meeting you would like to participate in. Committee meetings are listed in several places on NELIS, and to register, simply click the Participate button near the meeting date and time, and then fill in the required information, such as your name, the agenda item you're interested in, and your position on the bill. Once your registration is submitted, you will see a confirmation screen. You will also receive an email with a phone number and a meeting ID to call in at the time of the meeting. Just note that while meeting registration is required to participate, it does not guarantee you will be able to speak. Similar to previous sessions, testimony and public comment may be limited due to time constraints. When you are on the phone line, please pay attention to which bill is being considered and follow the verbal prompts provided by the BPS staff so that you know which keys to press to raise your hand or unmute yourself. Staff will call on you to speak by the last 3 digits of your phone number. Detailed instructions for participating in committee meetings are also available on the help page, which is linked in the banner at the top of every page on NELIS. If you need assistance with any of these processes, if you would like to receive electronic notification of the committee agendas, please contact our committee manager at the committee email listed on the agenda. Okay, so today we're going to have a presentation from the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and we're also going to hear one bill. To start off, we are going to welcome Director Brown and his team to then begin their presentation. Director Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's an honor to be here, particularly before this committee. I have worked with all of you in my former private life, in my public life of business and industry, and now in my life here at GOED, leading economic development. And I'm pleased also with this committee because I know its membership comprised some of the most experienced members in the area of economic development and associated areas such as housing and workforce development. And frankly, look forward to working with you as we find our way through the damage done by the pandemic and set the course for a future Nevada. I've been here since November of 19 when Governor Sisolak appointed me to this post. I initially started a process of understanding, where we were as we compared to other states. And I went back to DC, I met with about 10 think tanks focused on economic development, decided that we needed to update the state economic development plan, just thought we needed to unify the efforts with our RDA partners. We needed much more closer partnership than perhaps we had to that point. And I also wanted to strengthen the compliance programs inside this agency and also strengthen our audit and review processes with the Department of Taxation. Jimmy Hum actually joined us from Aaron Ford's office to support the development of the compliance programs here and to help with that area. I was embarking on that in the 2019 economy, went to the Las Vegas preview Las Vegas in January of 2020. And it was going to be the biggest year ever. Greatest number of conventions, greatest number of visitors, greatest number of everything. And we all left that with great optimism. And then about February 20th, I got this call from Michelle White, the governor's chief of staff. And she said, Director Brown, we're going to need some help perhaps on this issue that's developing in China with respect to the pandemic. And we'd like to borrow Greg Bordelin back from you to help with some areas in the area of education. And that was kind of my first sign that maybe something was really going to start to happen. And then I got a call from Chief White again on March 13th, and she says, Director Brown, I was in Carson City. She says, how fast can you get back to Las Vegas? Because we're going to have to make some major decisions over the weekend. And so I raced back to Las Vegas. And literally, I think every single day I have been involved somehow in the response, relief, or recovery from the pandemic. Initially, I deployed a lot of GOAD staff and supported the response. As we got into the summer months and we successfully flattened the curve, we shifted to working with Treasurer Conine with the new CARES relief dollars that came, and we were able to launch two relief programs for small business. And then he and Director Reynolds, with minor assistance from my office, worked on some of the housing programs and got those underway. Those are now $100 million programs in small business, and we appreciate the legislature's support of that. My view of that, and I've been using the term Dunkirk, was how do I rescue as many small businesses as we can from the beaches? And we did that with lots and lots and lots of small grants, $10,000 for small businesses. And, I think on a per capita basis, it's probably the largest in the United States. And frankly, it may be one of the largest in the United States just on a total dollar commitment to it. And in addition to that, there were resources that we coordinated with the county governments in the area of small business relief that they administered, but we stayed in close contact with them. And then finally, in July, August, I said to Bob, we started work on that economic recovery plan, and we turned to Roland and SRI, who we retained, and they've been assisting us in helping guide policymakers on policy decisions related to the pandemic, and also helping document things for federal filings. And so then we set about trying to come forward with a recovery plan, only to, as what happened in 1918, roll into a second phase of the pandemic, which ended up with, substantial infection rates in the fall. But we proceeded in that area, and right now the treasurer and I are finishing up the work on the PETS grants and getting that money out the door. And I will commend the civil service of Nevada, who put those programs together and were available to help businesses as they called. And we had support from the Department of Business and Industry, the Controller, Treasurer's Office, the Legislative Counsel Bureau, the IFC. And it was amazing how many people actually came forward to help us put those together. So then it was recovery. Where do we go now? And the thing that I'm learning and the thing I'm reading and what I'm experiencing now is looking back to 2019, it doesn't take us forward. The rearview mirror won't get us there. And so I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint here shortly, which we used in another committee. And I think most of you have seen it. And so I'll go through it quickly because there's a high level of experience on this committee and a high level of, and some of you have already seen this. And frankly, I'd like to have more of a robust discussion with you because I welcome any suggestions and ideas. We've gotten wonderful ideas from all sorts of sources. Our regional development authorities have also re-engaged their planning efforts right now, and that's underway. One of the things, though, we initiated two things. We initiated, with help from Switch, the creation of a business information network in partnership with the various chambers. And so we really now have the ability to have real-time communication across all the trade associations, all the business associations in the state. And then secondly is that I have started to engage directly with elected officials, particularly in Southern Nevada, and with my counterparts at City of Las Vegas, City of Henderson, City of North Las Vegas, and Clark County, trying to figure out how their economic development programs and our programs can complement each other. It's the concept of partnership, and so that's how we're going forward. You know, the governor and I are both baby boomers. We both grew up as teenagers when the Arab oil embargo of the early 70s ended the period of prosperity that started in 1945 and ended in 1974. Both of us were the sons of United Auto Workers who watched our fathers lose their jobs when the Midwest Rust Belt restructured itself in the late 1970s and early 1980s. And so these were both searing experiences for both of us and our families. And so we're trying to move Nevada forward. The governor put out a robust plan at the state of the state, and that's what my office is focused on now, and implementing as many of those provisions. I will say this as I turn to the PowerPoint in a second here, is that we're getting a number of inquiries from the kinds of companies we want to come to Nevada. And I do believe that there are opportunities here, and I'll walk through this PowerPoint quickly so that you see these, so that you understand the perspective. And I really do welcome all of your input on this. I've tried to hire the best and consult with the best, and need your input also. And this share, I guess I go up here to view, enter full screen. I think I was successful. Great. This is something, you know, Senator Paul Laxalt taught me about the 3 states in Nevada back when I first became associated with Nevada in the late 1990s. But Brookings' Mountain West has caused me to think about Nevada slightly differently, and that's to look at both our position as a Pacific time zone state, our position as a Pacific Rim state, and the interconnected we have with some of the healthiest, most robust economies in the United States. You know, I have had a lot of people talking to me about Texas, and I said the first thing I've learned when I talk to businesses that have gone to Texas is they like Texas because it's in the central time zone. They can do business on both sides of the country simultaneously. But on the other hand, there are businesses that have strong needs for connectivity in the Pacific, and we are a very attractive Pacific Rim state for them. Like I say, I hired SRI International initially to do a traditional plan, but now we've come out of the pandemic and things are still uncertain. McKinsey put out something that I still believe right now is the most insightful thing I've read. The next normal arrives, trends that'll define 21 and beyond. And essentially saying that we will look back on this period and we will define it as a pre-pandemic economy and a post-pandemic economy. And what came out of our research, which included consultations with about 200 plus Nevada leaders and the economic work that these kinds of folks do as a profession. They said advanced manufacturing, an energy world-class zero carbon economy, the health sector, the tech sector, and also Nevada as a remote work playground. You know, Bill Gates said last week, I believe, that he believes that business travel will be 50% of what it was in 2019. And that is an optimistic prediction because technologies like this that we now use multiple times a day, you know, will substitute for what might have been a 3-day business trip. They made a series of recommendations, some of which found their way into the state of the state, some of which are still in this policy document and available for you to consider for other initiatives. And if anyone wants briefed on any part of this, I am free to make Roland Stevens, our advisor on this, who also has done the Clark County plan and has worked with LVGEA. There's probably no individual outside of Nevada that knows more about Nevada right now than Roland Stevens, and we'd be glad to have him present anytime. Governor focused on new energy economy, new industries into the state, workforce innovations, and also a major emphasis on infrastructure. And I want to just say also on the area of infrastructure is that Southern Nevada particularly is an area where infrastructure has suddenly become very important. The kinds of companies that want to talk to us now want to talk about land and railroads and highways and all of those kinds of things, where just a year ago, they were more about office parks and things of that nature. And then, just so that we stay on track, we've kind of got a tracking of what the governor has put forward. Now, I'm going to get a little more theory here. When we look at the industries that can create growth and create diversification in the state as a whole, this is where we stand. In the upper right-hand box is the best box to be in. That's where your industry stars are. We have mining as a small star out in the rurals. We have strength, though, in manufacturing, natural resources, which is energy, information technology, logistics, health, aerospace. And we have a strong, robust gaming industry that is a huge part of our economy, but it is a mature industry at this stage. But when we look at Southern Nevada, obviously because of Southern Nevada's size, it tends to track the rest of the state and dominate its position. So it looks very similar. When we look at Northern Nevada, we see a very different picture. We see that the addition of Tesla, Panasonic, and other manufacturers in the industrial park there, and other decisions that were taken in logistics and operations has strengthened the Northern Nevada economy substantially. So much so that we're dealing with issues of housing, transportation, and a health sector that is struggling to keep up with the new demands that are being placed on it. And like I say, we can, at any time, if any of you want an individual briefing on this, Deputy Director Bob Potts and his staff, which was the golden Easter egg I found when I took this job, are available to assist you. Every Thursday throughout the pandemic, Bob has convened a meeting of the state economists, so we have a very good sense of what's happening in the state. Rural Nevada is, we're fortunate. We have a strong mining industry in rural Nevada, so we're not dealing with the challenges that some of states like Colorado, where they're really struggling in their rurals. But obviously we have mature and transforming. Transforming is not a box you want to be in. I'm from Cleveland. I know what transforming industries and communities are like. Rural Nevada is about energy, bringing that mining supply chain home, and I would encourage rural leaders to really give great focus to whatever we can do on broadband. Current economic situation, 22% decline in service industry, declined 22%, but our goods producing industry, our manufacturing sector, and people producing products in the pandemic only declined 3%. You see, we have a great variance, though, of unemployment between Las Vegas and Reno, 10% versus 5%. So we launched those relief programs, but we also were strong partners with business and industry and the SBA for the PPP loan program, the disaster relief loan programs, where we were the first state to qualify for that program, and then the commercial assistance and the technical support program, or the PETS program, which has been the most popular. Economic development, I kind of talked to you about what I tried to do when I first got here. Economic Development 101 is not something that this committee needs, so I will skip over that. We have lots of partners in this space. In fact, I was surprised. I said to my staff, I'd really like a chart that shows the entire universe of people involved in economic development, and I had no idea I would get a chart with these many people on it. Economic development tools we have, business development tools, abatements and incentives, a global trade program, a procurement outreach office, which I'm trying to do a lot more creative things on, and we'll have news about what I hope to do in that area in the next few weeks. A small business program, the film office. Then in the workforce, we have the WIN program, of which we'll consider legislation there. I will tell you, I asked each of my division heads when I joined here to look at their programs and said, this agency's 10 years old. Is there anything we need to do to update, and modernize anything that's within your programs? And so we have a series of bills that are just designed to kind of update these. And then we have responsibility for rural community block grant programs and the Main Street programs, and also a little tiny role in the area of Nevada Opportunity Zones. The main purpose of an economic development agency of any sort, though, is business attraction, bringing new businesses to the state. How do we help retain and grow the businesses that we have here and new businesses that are developed? I didn't come from this universe, and so I've come into it with a strong sense of what more can we do in this area, and through the pandemic, I've really gotten to know leaders like Peter Guzman and Ken Evans and the folks that lead our chambers of commerce, and I really want to do more in how we're actually connecting some of the new businesses that are coming here with the businesses that are already here. And that's an initiative I'm working with Sonia and Joan in our office on now to start to build out. Top line here. This is a very important line. The Hochman Index is, and I'm not an economist, and because I wear a bow tie, some people call me doctor. I don't have a PhD, but let me just tell you, this is a very important index. 100 is the best, and it shows the diversity of your economy. The Utah economy to our west is the highest in the nation, with a 97% diversified economy as measured by very smart people who developed this index. Arizona, below us, 96%. Colorado, within a stone's throw, 93%. Nevada rests regretfully at 67% as one of the least diverse economies in the Western United States. And this is what we need to fix. If we want to fix, and I believe this committee wants to see, and this legislature, if we want to have fiscal stability, then we need a more robust and diversified economy. And to drive that, we have to improve our score on the Hochman Index. I've asked the economic staff here to try to produce one of these by county, so that we're able to show what the index is for each part of the state. And as soon as we have that, we'll make that public. Manufacturing has become a very important part of the economy. Manufacturing, and we have some folks that could come before the committee and talk to this with great zeal. We, in the Biden administration, we believe we'll be launching efforts to facilitate the reshoring of American manufacturing back to the United States. We know that manufacturing has realized that e-commerce has changed their business and that they are now going to have to sort out their logistics and supply chains. We know that some of the capabilities that they thought that they had for delivery of product proved inadequate. And so we know there are companies in California that have decided that just maybe they'd like to be a little further east than California. And so the kinds of companies that we've been talking to have been validating the research that we found in SRI and the research that I picked up from McKinsey and from the think tanks, that there is something underway. And I believe, as these experts believe, that 21 is the pivot year and that we'll see a large change in the economy in 22, 23, 24 as companies sort this out. And this is where Nevada needs to be competitive. Many of these decisions are spreadsheet decisions. It's not about a personal relationship. It's going to be about whether the numbers pencil out. Growing a manufacturing sector creates strong supply chains. It creates medium to high skilled jobs. It has a deep vendor base, limited environmental externalities. And, if you think about Apex and some parts of Henderson, you don't end up with issues of not in my backyard. Business development, when companies are making the decisions, there's about 10 different criteria they use for relocation. I know that there's a lot of focus on the fact that Nevada doesn't have a personal or corporate income tax. That's not news. People already know that, and they've factored that in. And so, just trumpeting that we don't have these taxes within the small community of people who are the gatekeepers of economic development, and they're called site selectors, that is well known. It is difficult to find a scale. I can find some scales that show we're extremely business friendly. I can find others that show we're strong in some areas and weak in workforce and skills. But these are the things that people look at when they're making these relocation decisions. I'll say in the area of technology, and I know Senator Ratty and I talked about this recently, I have found this 50-state index where it shows that we rank 26th. And I thought, well, this is great. We rank 26th. We're halfway home in the technology and innovation field. But the situation is we rank first or second in some categories and 49th or 50th in others. And so what it says to me is we have real opportunity in this innovation economy if we can bring it all together. I know that the issue of tax abatements has been one that has been long debated and discussed in the last few years. And it's something that I challenged my team here to refresh all the research because I really wanted to know what was going on in this space. And when I say abatements and incentives, I'm not talking about the legislative agreements that were prepared for Tesla Panasonic or the Faraday project. I'm talking about the standard abatements, the plain vanilla abatements that we have to attract firms to the state. And we've learned a couple things. First off, ours are statutory. They're non-discretionary. They have major audit and review provisions and clawback provisions. That's actually not necessarily common across the United States. And I learned that because GOAD was operating in a bit of isolation. And if you spend any time with me, you'll hear the word partner more than you want to hear it. And so I associated us with the Pew Foundation, the Pew Institute in DC, and they have a group of progressive thinking economic development officers, and they had a compliance conference, and they asked us to speak on it. And Melanie, who's on our call here, went to that conference, and she came away realizing that we have one of the most regulated, most transparent systems in the United States, frankly. Business development tools we have in this space are sales and use tax, modified business, personal property tax abatements, and specialized abatements in aviation and data centers. Now, we have mentioned that we don't have a corporate and personal income tax. I will tell you in some states, they basically have just said to me, they say, well, look, we can offer all of these abatements in our corporate program because when the company's up and running, the state gets repaid with the personal income taxes that come from the new employees. And so, like I say, there's an advantage to closely held firms, but not having a corporate income tax is since '86 tax reform is something that's useful, but it's not the whole decision. I challenge the staff to go back and look at our compliance on all of this. And these are the standard abatements again, 316 approved, which led to 225 contractual agreements. Most of them were in manufacturing. The majority actually were in Clark County, and the majority were new and expanding businesses. When I got here, I discovered that the process that the taxation department that does the audits, it was a very informal staff-to-staff arrangement. And I said, no, Director Young and I are going to sit down once a quarter with my staff, Jimmy Hum, our compliance staff, and with the auditors. And we're going to go through what's going on with every audit of every company that's received an abatement. And so we do that once a quarter. I also went to the auditors and I said, okay, you have 10 years experience doing these audits. What do I need to change at GOAD to make your audits more effective? And so the next contract that we do for abatements will reflect some of those recommendations from this career civil service staff on how we can make our audits even more reliable. We've had 31 companies that were found in non-compliance. We brought them into compliance for a recapture rate of 84%. I think those are extraordinarily high numbers. And there's a few that are outstanding right now, and I think that's what makes up the difference. One of the committees in the Assembly asked for more information on that, and we're getting that from the Department of Taxation now. I also asked Bob Potts and his team to do a fiscal analysis of what this has meant for Nevada. What have we actually abated? And this is with the standard abatements. This is outside the Tesla arrangement. This is outside the post-Faraday arrangement. And we've abated $339 million in these taxes. But because we don't abate to zero in Nevada, we have actually collected over the last 10 years from these companies that made a decision to come here as part of this deal, $1.5 billion with a total economic impact of $55 billion. We have a very comprehensive report on this that we've submitted for the record, and we would always be available to discuss any of this in much greater detail. Governor Sisolak challenged me when I took this job that his view was if we're going to offer tax abatements, we want these companies to be larger than life and to do more for the community. So we are actually now pressing the companies to tell us more about their corporate social responsibility programs, diversity, hiring, veterans, local purchasing. I actually have a very activist board now that is busy asking companies, what are you doing in these areas? The Secretary of State consistently asks, what are you doing to help small business? Lieutenant Governor asks about engagement with higher education. So it's a very activist board now and very pleased to have. Let me say one thing about data centers. Data centers, it took a while for me to get my head around data centers. Is it a factory? No, it's not a factory. What is it? And really, this is a once in a generation build out of the cloud. And billions of dollars are going to be spent on these facilities. The fact that today's Zoom call or Zoom hearing is going to be recorded and stored is going to take substantial amount of space somewhere in one of these data centers. And so for those of you that might remember the old dial telephones, there used to be this fortress-like building in every small town where all the switching equipment was stored that made those calls possible. And I said to one of the data center companies, I said, in essence, you're the 21st century version of that. And he said to me, would you help come and explain that to others when we try to explain what a data center in the cloud is? Aviation, obviously the aviation industry has suffered, but we have progress in this area and the opportunity for more growth. Transferable tax credits, I have an update here on where we are, but I believe we have worked through all of these. This is not a tool that the governor has or I have really embraced to deploy. We're kind of content with the system that we have in place right now. Just broadly speaking, within GOAD, we have a knowledge fund, a state small business credit fund. We have the international program where we continue to get more resources from the federal government in this area. And then other GOAD programs, the PTAC program, the film office, and then other tools like the Opportunity Zone and small business. Workforce, which we'll turn to shortly. And then, Madam Chair, I'd be glad to, if you want to do before the bill or after the bill, entertain questions. And my entire staff has joined you today so that we could answer any questions you have. And just if you would like to have a discussion on ideas, this is the moment. You're all here. I'm here. We're ready. We're at a point in transition in history. This is the time for all of us to kind of come together and try to get it right. And I've mentioned our rural program. So I hope that wasn't too fast, but I appreciate the opportunity. And most sincerely, I appreciate those of you who have already reached out to me. And there's multiple members of this committee that have done that with their thoughts and suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Brown. We do have some questions. We'll take questions on the presentation and then get into the bill.
Certainly.
So first up is Vice Chair Ratty.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Brown, for your presentation. Super helpful. Really appreciate having your fresh set of eyes on the program and doing the thorough review. The question that I have, one of the critiques that I often hear about the tax abatements, and I'm talking about the vanilla version as well, is that we're giving abatements to companies that would have moved here otherwise. And so I'm wondering in your research and your evaluation, if you've come across any way to really be able to quantify or really dig into if that's truly the case.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Senator, it's in the parlance of economic development. let me make sure. This is called the but-for test. But for the abatement, would they or not come here? And usually they've already gone through a process of winnowing down the states. They don't start with 50. They hire a professional who brings it down into a small number. Then they look at infrastructure, they look at workforce, and now it's narrowing down even further between 1 or 2 states. And then ultimately it becomes, then they want to know, what kind of tax incentive is available in Nevada, what kind of tax incentive is available in another state. And we ask that, they have to make certification in this area on their application. What the governor has really pushed hard on is, and the board and board member Claich particularly, is that we felt that the salaries for some of the earlier more recent abatements had been too low. And as you know, the governor froze any abatements and incentives for a period of time. And so we started, rather than just using average across all of it, we actually would look at each application and each salary for each position and compare it to the census information we had for that occupation within that area of Nevada. And Melanie has done a superb job of getting them to pop up some of those so that everything's been fixed, and we're starting to see a higher average on that. Ultimately, then it goes to the board. The company's got to come in and make a public presentation. This is not something that's in the 19th hole of a golf course. This is before a committee with 3 constitutional officers on it, and we have that discussion. Those that aren't making that but-for never make it to that level. They just fall away, or they're ones where it's like, folks, this just isn't strong enough for me to take it forward. And I don't know if Deputy Director Potts, who's actually a trained economist, would want to say any words about that also.
Well, and let me just make sure for clarification. So I think that was a good answer, and it really is good work to make it sure that we're narrowing down to get better companies and higher quality companies. I'm not really sure it got me to the place of, but would they have come anyway?
So, Vice Chair Ratty, this is Bob Potts for the record. Maybe I can help a little bit with that. So, in the last 3 years, we really tried to address that question. And so, we ask all the companies that we work with how important. There's a whole scale of things that we ask them questions on. And Mel may have the information, the questionnaire in front of her. But one of those questions on there is, whether you got the abatements or not, was that a deal breaker? Did that make a difference? And of the 70% of the companies that have received abatements, a little over 70% abatements was a deal maker or deal breaker.
And just to make sure that I'm tracking that. So basically what you're doing is you're surveying the folks who did come to kind of get a retrospective look on that so that it gives you a sense of the trend.
Yeah, and we're also asking the companies that also apply.
And I would assume that the companies who apply always say, yes, we need the abatement.
Well, and it's part of, again, Deputy Director Potts here, for the record. It's always the question of sample bias, right? Whenever you're doing survey work, right? And getting the bias out of it. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to structure the survey to eliminate as much of the bias as possible so you can actually get to, is this really real? Is this a deal? And also taking into account all of the, there's countless number of conversations we have with these companies, that the RDAs have with these companies, which we're working with them to find out for sure, is this really, does this really make a difference to you? Or do you already have your mind made up? This is what you were going to do, this is where you're going to go, or this is how you were going to expand. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Kekeffer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Director Brown, I was curious to go back to your presentation on, in a couple of places. If we could go back to your graphs with the QI quadrants with mature,
Sure.
start, and emerging.
Sure.
And do you use this and these QI growth factors as indications of where economic development strategies should be placed? So if I look at, for example, the Southern Nevada targeted industries on page 8, would I be looking at the larger sized emerging industries like health and medical and logistics and operations and IT to try to move them up into the star category? And that's how we identify places to focus energy?
Madam Chair, Senator, yes, and I'm going to let Director Potts address that directly. Deputy Director Potts.
Again, for the record, this is Bob Potts. Senator Kekeffer, so that is location quotients over time, okay? Location quotients is just a concentration of workers in an industry as compared to the national average. Those charts are for us to help understand what's going on with our target sectors, where they're at. The size of the bubble refers to the number of the jobs. Anything above the horizontal line reflects where we have a higher concentration of workers than the national average. Anything below, we have a lower concentration. On the vertical line, anything to the left means we're losing ground. The x-axis is a time axis, okay? So this is over that period, that 10-year period in there. So anything to the left of the axis means that we're losing ground. Anything to the right means we're gaining ground. So that's why you can actually label those different quadrants that way. So it's a way for us to track the target sectors that were part of GOED's strategic efforts, and to see what's happening in those sectors and whether we're gaining ground. So what matters is what's in that emerging box, right, in that lower right-hand box, to see okay, these are the ones where we're still below the national average, but we're moving to the right. We're to the right of that vertical line. So we're actually moving up to what Director Brown talked about earlier, getting up into that star box, so, where you're actually, you have a comparative advantage in those industries.
Is it? Yeah, I think that's generally how I've always looked at QI. I'm curious as to whether there's more value placed on industries that have larger base employment or smaller base employment. So, for example, there's a lot of talk about manufacturing, but in Southern Nevada, that's a smaller piece, for example, than health and medical. So, but then when we looked at, for example, page 18 with the Hockman Index, that seemed to focus primarily on indicators and manufacturing related indicators and incentives. So I'm just curious as to if there are, within all of the target industries, how you select which ones to focus on.
Well, I'll go again, Deputy Director Potts, for the record. So what we're trying to do, you identify where you have a comparative advantage, okay? And part of what this slide shows us is, okay, so where does Nevada have a competitive advantage? Where are we seeing growth over the last 10 years? Where should we refocus our efforts and retool ourselves to push into those areas? So what's in that emerging sector, what shows up is manufacturing, technology, healthcare, logistics and operations, for instance. It helps us narrow those down so we can put more effort into those. If you look at the job pie as a whole, we want our number of jobs to grow, not decrease, right? But you want to change the slices of those pies, right? And so if you move more folks, if one of the bubbles gets smaller, the others would naturally have to get bigger. What you want them to do is you want them to get bigger, and you want them to get bigger in industries that are your target sectors. If you do your sector analysis, you're focusing on industries that actually grow your economy as a whole, not only in the job field, but also as far as bringing money into the economy. So the flow of money runs back into the state and its regions. Okay, so you think about all the goods and services that we produce. The whole goal is to produce those where what we do here is sold to customers outside the region and those monies flow in. Manufacturing is a great example of that. The logistics side of things is too. Technology can be too. Healthcare is often considered an industry that supports people that are already here. But if you don't have good healthcare, good luck getting the other ones. Okay, so there's a lot of moving parts that go on here, but there's theory and reason behind all of them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And so on page 18, when it came to the Hockman Index, if we were supposed to look at increasing that share of the pie for manufacturing, particularly in Southern Nevada, where we haven't had as much success in terms of the overall percentage, right? It's gone up from 2.3% to 2.4% in the decade. At the previous slide on page 18 shows that our competitive landscape in the West indicates possibly these the number of incentive programs available is significantly less than our competitors, as well as the exemption on sales tax on manufacturing machinery. Those sort of two of the big driving factors for manufacturing, and would you suggest changing those if we want to grow that piece of the pie for Southern Nevada?
Yeah, Michael Brown, for the record, yes. Many states are able to take their the sales tax for manufacturing equipment to zero. And I think on one of those maps, we show that there are states that were largely outside the Industrial Revolution that are still taxing manufacturing equipment. It's my understanding that ours is embedded because of constitutional provisions that were created when the sales tax was established in the 1950s. So for manufacturers, and Mike Kazmierski can speak very eloquently to this, is that the manufacturing, the abatement incentive becomes very important for manufacturers to offset what will be the sales tax. On the fiscal side, though, because we actually do have that, there will be a collection of revenue to the state.
So if changes that we've made in the past, like not exempting the LSST portion for people coming in, is that having a detrimental impact on our ability to recruit manufacturers into some?
Yeah, I think the answer to that's yes, but I'm going to turn to Bob for a second. Bob, you're muted.
My apologies. Bob Potts again for the record. Well, yeah, it does make a difference, right? But it's all on the margin. I think everything has to be taken in context. There's a lot of different things. I mean, Michael talked a little bit earlier on one of the slides about the top 10 site selector lists, right? We're going to talk here in a little bit about the WIN program we have, very targeted. Many of the projects that we've dealt with there was specifically to manufacturing. It goes back to workforce needs. But the abatement side is in there, and there are times when on the margin it does make a difference.
I appreciate that. I'll also thank you for the indulgence, Madam Chair. I'll just say that the schedule of abatements that you submitted as a part of the exhibits for this committee meeting, I think, are really interesting and valuable. So I just say thank you for getting those to us as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Senator Dennis.
I think actually Senator Kekeffer just asked, I was going to ask on page 18, I guess I could ask a follow-up on page 18 where we're looking at our neighbors. We're talking about, at least on this particular measure, the Hackman Index. Did you mention that Utah, is Utah the top one in the country?
Yeah, Utah has the highest diversification in the nation. Utah made decisions, economic development, like I say, is not something that happened overnight. Utah made decisions in the 1980s that set them on a course to diversify their economy. They were a farming, copper mining state that was subject to big swings in the economy, and they made some fundamental decisions. And over the course of time, it's really they've created a very diverse and successful economy.
So, but what about like Arizona? Because Arizona's not that far behind. I mean, did they do a similar thing?
Arizona's an aggressive company. I've had a staff member, and we haven't finished this yet, but we're actually doing a comparative study of Nevada with Colorado, Arizona, and Utah so that we fully understand our competitive arrangement situation with those states.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be interesting to see what if there's something we can learn from there that, they have a different revenue structure also than we do. But, I know a lot of, we need to figure out that diversity piece, because that would help us to avoid those swings that we keep having every time the economy goes bad. So.
Yeah, Michael Brown for the record, Senator and Madam Chair. I would say that Arizona is a difficult state for us sometimes to understand because their government structure is quite different than ours. And so we're trying to fully understand Arizona. Colorado and Utah are very good comparables. But now that I have this little coalition of about, dozen economic development directors, my counterpart in Maine, who's part of this group, Maine's number one sector was tourism. 21 million visitors a year to Maine. And they've been hit hard. And her economic development plan for the future looks a lot like ours. How do they get advanced manufacturing, technology, healthcare into those areas? Where we have this advantage is if you look at those borders, there are nations of the world that would like to have the geographic position that Nevada has. I will say this, having lived briefly in Utah, is Utah has spent a lot of time on untangling its infrastructure and making itself ready for growth to the point, as you probably know, the Utah prison used to sit at Thanksgiving Point between Salt Lake and Provo, and they've now torn down that prison, building a new prison by the airport. I guess probably a finished prison, so you'd have to put the prisoners somewhere, and are redeveloping all that for Silicon Slopes. So,
yeah, it's just interesting to see that. And you mentioned this, but everybody knows we have a good tax structure, right? Isn't that what you said?
Yes, it's well known. And what we've got to do now is amplify our opportunities to be in this time zone, to be proximate to California and the Pacific Rim, and with a robust, strong workforce of people willing to work.
Yeah. So what I learned from that was that even though they know we have this low tax structure, that isn't just enough for people to flock here and for us to diversify. We've got to do some other things. So.
Yeah, for certain kind of companies, for a closely held company, where it would come onto your personal return or something. But for a large multinational corporation, since '86 tax reform, they've managed their way around most state taxes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair Neal, this is Bob Potts, if I might.
Go ahead.
Okay, I would like to add to Senator Dennis's question here a little bit. One of the things that most folks don't realize, and I was actually surprised about this when I learned of it, and it may be helpful, is that not having a personal income tax isn't necessarily as big of an advantage as we think it is, because they can't deduct it from their federal income tax, which was an interesting situation.
Thank you for that. So I have a couple of questions. I'm kind of going to work backwards. During the pandemic, I got this awesome opportunity to interview Director Larry Kudlow. And the conversation that we had, it was a national conversation in CSL. And I got to ask him some questions. But what I want to know is, after the federal money is gone, that is incentivizing or infusing capital into our small businesses, what is the state plan of capital infusion after that money expires? Because when I was looking at your slides, these programs, as a small business credit initiative, opportunity zones was supposed to do some form of that, but we have had several programs undergo it that were supposed to be focused on small business. But I want to know, what are we going to do post Fed money and work on capital for our businesses? What's the plan?
Let me say a couple things. First off, I believe the number I've heard from the GFO is that we've estimated, I think, is about $21 billion has been infused into the Nevada economy since the start of the pandemic. And a second large, robust relief measure on the way. It's why we had prioritized how we could do to stabilize the small businesses that are here. Restoring public health so that we can get that tourism and hospitality economy back up and running has to be the first priority. At that point, also in engaging on these pandemic relief measures with small business, we realized how much just personal support they needed. Treasurer and I spent a lot of time, and our staffs have, working with individual small businesses. I came away realizing that small businesses are busy running a small business. They need as much help as they can. We are standing ready to help roll out the shuttered venue program, which would help in arts and culture. At that point, we have got to do everything we can, like I say, to stand up our hospitality economy. And I was really amazed at the number of small businesses that are in support of our convention. Then we have some existing tools in the toolbox. With interest rates really so low right now, is that some of the tools we have don't really match this economy. That may be something we want to have more discussion about this session. Beyond that, we have limited resources as a state fiscally that we can put into these areas. And so it is a matter of now trying to attract the kind of firms that will build the supply chains that will help lift small business with it.
So thank you for that. Because I asked this question because I have this weird economic philosophy that although I like federal investment, I also like states to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And so I was wondering if there was a conversation on taking the abatements that we have and maybe, going through them and retailoring them to maybe fit the small business needs versus, well, I won't say versus, but to have like a dual activity versus the larger firm, but actually trying to situate our abatement program so that it benefits small businesses, so that in a fiscal tight environment, that we could at least use some of the tools on the books and try to use them in a different way. And I asked that question because, VCAS is under GoEd, and you get that $300,000 a year. That's an allotment to VCAS. And it's focused on equipment, it's focused on these other things, and they do a $15,000 grant. But that program has shown that there is capacity, number one, to infuse, not just via grants, but to do a different kind of model based on lower capital businesses that are maybe under the $200,000 threshold, who are the bread and butter businesses who can really broaden out our business base and support growth. I just want to know if there's any conversation there.
Madam Chair, it's a very good point. And there's a lot of literature right now out there on what's happening in small business and the struggles they're going to have. And it's very real, particularly with e-commerce changing purchasing patterns. And what I've been doing is I've been looking across different states to see what programs they might have underway in this area. And most of them are still right now trying to feel their way through it. What I have not found states that have been able to deploy abatements and incentives to small businesses. I don't know why that is, and it may be because those abatements and incentives many small businesses are filing as a Schedule C on their personal tax return, and so I'm not sure that there's a way for states to deploy into that area. We do have programs for expansion of businesses and to help retain. What I have seen in some of the states, but these are states with the more robust fiscal conditions, is I've seen them stand up permanent grant programs to help small business in these areas. I've seen a few where they've had targeted areas for minority businesses. I've seen in Colorado, they have a program for the creative arts. But those states also might have a more robust fiscal resources than I'm afraid we have available to us. It is ongoing work that I'm doing right now. And looking for options. I spoke at the Urban Chambers Conference last week, and I was challenged by the leadership, and they said, so we're bringing these companies to Nevada. What does that do for our folks? And I've thought about it a long time, and I think one of the things that we've tended to do is we've tended to onboard these companies to the state and then left them to find their way around the state. And so I've been talking to the PTAC folks and to Sonia in my office, and I would like to find a way that once we've landed these companies here, that we actually do an onboarding with them and say, look, tell us what you need here. How can we match you to small businesses in the state? And so conceptually, these are some of the ideas I have on my desk right now, that as we come out of the relief program, I hope to turn creative attention to that. You have raised an issue, though, that is national in scope.
Yeah, I just feel like our abatements are a statutory construct, which means that we could take creative thought to redirect them and think through the application of them to our smaller businesses. But that's just my framework.
Yeah. Madam Chair, the governor had a roundtable with small businesses, and it is just something we're continuing to discuss. And like I said, I'm looking at other states, and most are facing the same challenge. And right now, they're focused on immediate relief.
Okay, thank you for that. So I know Senator Sievers-Gansert has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to thank Director Brown and his staff, Bob and the staff, for all the work that they've been doing, because it's been really difficult. And you provided us a wealth of information today, so I'm grateful for that. In looking at, we've had some discussions about the Hatchman Index and the diversification, and I think that's really important, that we may want to look at, or maybe it's a question, should we be looking at setting goals for how we're going to diversify, like percentage-wise? And when I looked at your bubble charts, it talked about sort of where our base is now and where potentially we can grow. But does it take into account wages? Because I think it's more about the number of jobs and potential growth, but on a relative basis, but not necessarily the wages. Because when you look at advanced manufacturing, you look at healthcare, you're going to find larger or higher wages than logistics. So I think when we start looking at where we want to or how we want to diversify, it's not only the sectors, well, it is the sectors, but it's what do those sectors pay? And that would be wages and benefits.
Yeah, and I would encourage you, if you ever have time, to watch a GOAD meeting. This is something the governor has a great personal passion on, and I'll commend my staff and the RDAs because they have basically told some of these companies, this is not going to go down. You better see what you can do to fix this before we take it forward. Absolutely agree. Family sustaining jobs.
I think wages are important, and but I was looking at your annual report on page 3, and it looks at capital investment and the new jobs and the average wage, and we actually peaked out probably between 2014 and 2017. And what I thought was interesting was it was the highest number of jobs, but it was also the highest average wage. So we were doing something right, because I think that we had as the economy became more robust. The question of like incentives and abatements became more questionable. But when you look at the net tax that we received, the but for, we really were doing well. And so I appreciate that you've been working on the state plan, because I think the state plan and workforce development are connected, right? So when I looked at page 20 of your PowerPoint today, we've got the list of what matters most. Having the strategic plan and identifying the sectors, which is where you're going now, is critical, so we can identify what we want to do on the workforce side. And so what I'm circling around to is I think we're back on track, or we're going the right direction, but it may be time because we have so much set in statute, to look at incentives and abatements and the programs that we have. And you had just mentioned that you're doing a comparative study between Colorado, Arizona, and Utah. And that type of information, I think, is critical, because this is extremely complex. How do you diversify? Where do you diversify? What types of jobs? What types of salaries? What actually does incentivize? I appreciate that you're doing surveys now. I think that's really important. Would they have come if not for the abatements and incentives and so forth? And getting that feedback is really important. So I appreciate your work. I just think there's a lot more work to be done to refine how we're addressing this, and I absolutely agree that you're on the right track. But I think we probably need to sort of look at everything that's set in statute to see what's most effective. And I think we've learned a lot too, right? So part of this is we've spent 10 years learning more about our successes and maybe what we could do better.
Well, thank you, Senator and Madam Chair. Also, cross-state comparisons can sometimes be hazardous. Russ Ginden on your staff has coached me that, what the words in our statute and the words in their statute, they may be the same word, but it may be different meanings. And so as we drill down deeper into those states, we're trying to make sure that we're comparing an apple with an apple in that area. I will also say that our system was built, the Utah system, it was built with one centralized GOAD and one nonprofit in support of that. And because most of Utah sits along the Wasatch Front. between Ogden and Provo. Our system was built regionally for the 3 states in Nevada. So we have 7 RDAs out there. And so each one has unique. And so a lot of what Bob and I and Chris are trying to do is big picture. How do we position Nevada? How do we troubleshoot? How do we fix issues? What you're not seeing today is a lot of the more detailed, finer implementation work that Mike Kosmierski and Jonas Peterson and Rob Hooper and Sheldon Mudd are doing, and Paul and all those folks are doing out in their regions. You're not seeing that today, but it definitely exists.
Yeah, I agree with you. The regional development authorities and the work they're doing is critical. One of the most important pages I think we probably have today that demonstrates the importance of abatement programs is page 25, where you look at the abatements of about $340 million. But the net tax revenue over the same period, the same 10-year period, is $1.5 billion, and 10-year economic impact is $55 billion. So there's true value here, and I think we've been pretty. It sounds like, given the research that you've done, we've done a pretty good job as far as auditing and clawbacks and all those things to make sure that we're not just throwing money out there, but that it's well used and helping to grow and diversify our economy. But I do think this demonstrates its importance. And I would propose that we probably need to look at what we have in statute to make sure that we continue to be on track, because our environment is absolutely changing and the changes have accelerated with this pandemic. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Senator and Madam Chair. Roland Stevens, who consults with us and helps us with this, was at our last Go Ed More meeting, but we did the business meeting first, and he presented last. So he got to hear all the presentations. And he's got a big international 50-state perspective. And he said there are states that would crawl over broken glass, to have the list of applications that he saw approved that day. And I'm born in Ohio. I'm still connected to Ohio. I'm still connected to Virginia. And I can tell you, my friends in Ohio have said, if you don't want that, send it to us. We'll take it.
Right. And again, we've had great work out in the RDAs, a good structure, which was redone in 2011, and then also the work at the regional level. So thank you.
Madam Chair, I have this wonderfully bright staff, and I don't know if I've missed anything, but if we were in a hearing room, I'd be turning to them and saying, is there anything we need to else say? If you would indulge me, I would just ask whether Bob or Chris Sanchez have anything that needs to be added, or that the director's gotten wrong.
Things I could talk about, but I would like to pass it to Melanie. I think Melanie has a couple of additions that I think would be helpful for Senator Sievers-Gansert.
Melanie Sheldon for the record. Senator Sievers-Gansert, thank you very much for the record and for bringing up the wages. I just wanted to clarify that in statute, there is a wage criteria, and companies not meeting that wage criteria are not eligible to apply for abatements. That wage criteria is set every year by DETA, and they will do a statewide average wage. It has continually been growing since 2011, and we set that as one of the actual linchpin criteria. So first and foremost, the company must at least meet that statewide average wage criteria as set by DETA on the 1st of July every year. And then from there, their capital investment and their hiring, their job creation, they sort of have a little bit of room in those areas, but certainly not with the wage.
Yeah, no. So thank you. I appreciate you highlighting that, and I understand that we have pretty strict, or we do have standards in statute. I think there are a number of people would probably suggest that we could raise that. That it isn't just meeting your average wage, and even though that gets reset, that maybe it's a 1.2 or something like that, because there's a difference between the wages make a difference, and so do the benefits. So we want to have the best jobs that we can for Nevadans, and we recognizing that that's going to take some investment in workforce development and so forth, sort of the chicken and the egg. Are we going to get the highest paying jobs here if we don't have the best educated workforce? And so we need to work on both ends. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
Chris Sanchez for the record. Thank you, Director. The only thing I would add is that Director Brown has talked a bit about this in the past, and we're focusing on it, and that is infrastructure. And with the changing environment that we're experiencing post-COVID, understanding our assets in our community. and how we can leverage those and develop moving forward with respect.
I believe you're breaking up. It's like portions of the sentence is not coming in.
Michael Brown, Madam Chair, I think I know where Chris is going, is that in Southern Nevada particularly, we need to untangle some infrastructure issues with respect to transportation and land so that as these inquiries are coming to us, we make sure we have a place for them to go. And LVGA is doing a great job of dealing with what's coming knocking on our door right now. But longer term, that community, just as Reno did, needs to prioritize some of the basics of economic development of land and power and water and industrial park. And we actually we've got a number of people working on this. Chris is leading a little temporary task force to figure out what knots need untangled. And this morning I spoke at NAOP and discussed some of the issues in there.
Thank you for that. Members, any additional questions? If not, I'm going to move to the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stacy Bostrick leads the WIN program, has been a valued member of our team. I will tell you that I've got some expertise in a lot of areas, and workforce is probably the area where I have deficiencies. And so she'll be presented in full today, and Bob Potts will be in support. I will also say that pre-pandemic, she had been working on some larger projects that I hope when we get into the post-pandemic economy, she'll be able to return to and how we can move Nevada forward in this area. But I think she's got a good track record, and she'll discuss the need for this legislation, mindful, of course, that our portion of the workforce agenda in the state is the engagement directly with business. So with that, I'll turn it to Stacy.
So we will close the presentation and open up the hearing on SB 24.
Thank you, Chairwoman Neal and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify about SB Senate Bill 24. Just wanted to echo what Director Brown mentioned, that we really look forward to the conversation and discussion on this program that we've had in-house for about a little over 4 to 5 years. For the record, my name is Stacy Bostrick, and I'm the Director of Workforce Development at the Governor's Office of Economic Development, or GOED. You'll hear that acronym, of course. I'm here today. I have a couple colleagues, actually a lot, but you'll probably hear mostly from myself, Director Brown, Deputy Director Potts, and James Hum, our Director of Compliance. I'm going to start off by giving you a little bit of background, and I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint just to kind of share some visuals as I go through some of these pieces. So just a little bit of background. The Workforce Innovations or for New Nevada, or WIN, was established in 2015. It was AB1, substantially funded in 2016 and 2017 for the first time, and is a tool that's managed by the Governor's Office here of Economic Development. It's really designed to address business needs, and to echo kind of that space, we kind of have a narrow focus in there. We really are looking at how we can help accelerate the creation, customization, or expansion of workforce training programs. To try and put it simply, WIN is in this space, and it was conceived to catalyze new workforce training programs that are developing that talent pipeline needed by industry, and creating these opportunities for individuals to get the skills needed for those jobs. Wanted to highlight a recent investment that we made with the College of Southern Nevada. It's a $2 million project to expand advanced manufacturing training programs, and in part to respond to the new headquarters for Haas and Henderson. And it's a really great example of how WIN works and the purpose and impact of WIN. Obviously, we're trying to impact the limited supply, right? Changing the course there, increasing the supply of skilled workers, and ensuring people can have the skills necessary for those job opportunities, and thousands in this case. And, we hope to be able to affect positive change in that space in both of those. It's a real win-win proposition in our view. This slide obviously is just really big picture, but wanted to kind of highlight since 2016, substantially when we've gotten funding, GoEd's board and leadership approved nearly $11 million in project funding, shaping new workforce training programs in partnership with 41 business partners throughout the state. To date, we look at kind of our successes here. Nearly 2,000 Nevadans have been able to access 19 new or expanded programs that have received WIN investments in high skill and high wage sectors, including advanced manufacturing, healthcare, technology, mining, and logistics and operations. We do that primarily in partnership from, our activities within GoEd, with our partners, with RDA, and then, of course, local industry representatives. Big picture, SB 24 is ultimately, in our view, administrative updates based on our experience. I've been working in workforce with GoEd for about 2.5 years. And so kind of with those 4 or 5 years of experience, really want to make sure that our statutes focus on expanding that skills-based economy, that we're really laser focused and closing that workforce training gaps, and kind of just building on the foundation that we've had and meeting needs as we've learned through our experiences thus far. I wanted to go through the bill. The items that we'll go through are in chronological order, if that's okay, just to kind of help track through. And if there's any preference in changing that, then please do let me know. We'll try and keep it high level.
That's good to go through the bill. It's fairly short, but yeah, go through section by section and break it down.
Thank you, Chair. I'll do that. So in looking at the bill, section 1, items 2D through G basically outline a needs assessment. It's an exercise that we want to do to make sure that GoEd is kind of ensuring that we're laser focused on those gaps, and that in that way we complement the workforce system. Items 2H through L really are looking at the training provider's capacity or educational provider partnership. Can they deliver the program in partnership with that industry representative? We want to take a look at, do they have the ability to succeed? Can they stand up a program, and can they sustain that in the long run for that return on investment? Continuing in section 1, item 2O adds language. And what we're really trying to accomplish there is just to really solidify that public-private partnership. And this is really kind of a lot about data collection. Data really helps us understand what's working well and what's not. And so we want to make sure that our industry is partnering with us and sharing that data, which is helpful to us. In a similar vein, item 4B facilitates some of the due diligence that we think is important, so that we can ensure our partnerships are with compliant and quality employers in Nevada. This particular section also, and through this presentation, we're looking to amend some of the language that's in that space to conform, given the state of our economy and businesses. We want to be real clear that this isn't a punitive approach, but we want to take a look at, in situations where there were furloughs or layoffs in an occupational area, that we are still making a prudent investment with that employer, and that things are still on the up and up. Items 3C and 6A, B, and C are really about accountability, and they codify the expectation of our goals in relation to a skills-based economy. So we want to make sure that workforce training programs are delivering industry-recognized credentials, are identifiable occupational skills. We want to look at skills gaps and skills mismatches. We want to make sure that this is something that can be transferable and overall improves the state of our workforce. Lastly, in that area, priority we want to make sure is given to programs of compressed curriculum. I think time is always of the essence in our workforce, especially when individuals are making transitions that's especially important right now. We want to make sure that we're focusing on accelerated pathways to employment. Continuing in section 2, items 7A through H and item 8 provide a few adjustments to statutory allowances for funding. These are not really substantial changes, so we're not seeing big shifts, but they are changes that come from our experience in putting together projects and learning about resources that are needed by our educational partners to make sure they're successful. We also have some language in here where we're seeking to clarify that in the event the equipment is not needed or retained by a program, that we can redeploy that to another program within the state to ensure that investment can continue in workforce development. This last section is the one probably we'll have the most discussion on, and the intent for GoEd was to look at changing language in the statute to enable a non-reversion. So the current statute requires us to revert at the end of the biennium. So the language here at this time is establishing a new account with interest that won't revert to the general fund, and any unexpended appropriations made to the account must be credited. It means that does not revert. Session law could override this, though, as the statute states that bills must be paid through a state system and not from an outside bank account. We're looking at administrative flexibility in this space so that the investments that we're making have continuity. We obviously want to meet business where they're at, and we are working with educational partners who are on a different structure and different time frame than us, academic calendars or fiscal years. And that's caused us some challenges and inabilities to be able to fund those projects. So we want to kind of marry those pieces together so that we can make investments where we're seeing that they need to be made. Obviously, that has an impact, and we'd like to discuss that, and we're open to that as well. So those are kind of the formal comments that we wanted to make about the statute changes, and appreciate your time and being able to share those. And we welcome any questions, of course, at this time.
Hey, thank you for that presentation. I believe we have a question from Senator Kekeffer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a few. In section on page 3 of the bill, section 1, subsection 2, the new paragraph I, it looks to me in the last few words of that, it says a proposed plan for the provision of a proposed program of workforce recruitment, assessment, and training on a statewide basis. Does that mean all programs have to be done statewide?
Stacey Bostwick, for the record, no. Obviously, in this day and age, when we're talking about technology and virtual learning, there's a lot of programs that are. And where there are, we want to make sure those investments are shared within the state, that they're not necessarily geographically isolated, but that obviously can't apply to every program.
The way I read that, it says that a program has to be statewide, so we might just want to look at turn that on. Let's see, on page, in section 3 of the bill, that talks specifically to a business that is applying for WIN funds. It looks like this amendment says that they can only train existing employees, and they can't use it to train new employees. Is that your intent?
Stacey Bostwick, for the record, there's actually really two distinct parts, and they kind of mirror each other. There's kind of one set of language within statute that really kind of looks at big picture training, probably targets more of the pipeline and maybe the newly hired folks and kind of partnership. And then there's a part of the bill that does allow for incumbents. And so we always try to mirror the language in both places. So if we apply one standard to one side of the statute, we apply it to the other side. So there is no intent to only do incumbent. We have the flexibility, the way the statute's written, to do both if that's what's needed for a given project.
Yeah, I think section 3 might be a little confusing to that end, because it says a person who operates a business or will operate a business. apply to the Office for Approval of a Program of Workforce Training for incumbent employees. If they will operate a business, they may not have any incumbent employees. So I just, I think clarity on that might. And then when it comes to the general fund reversion, I don't necessarily have any issues with that. I mean, recognize the money committees might always just not appropriate you any more money if you have a lot of money carried forward.
Stacy Bosch, for the record, I'm not sure if there was a question in there, but I recognize that, and I think that we're open to that discussion. I think, as you all know, we have to submit a biennial report every 2 years, and so however that accounting needs to look, we're open to that.
Thank you for that. I believe Senator Sievers-Gansert, is that your hand up?
It is. Thank you.
Okay.
In looking at Section 3, there's a note about talking, I guess it would be Section 3(2)D, the initial plan for wage increases for employees who successfully complete the program. When you introduced, when you talked about the average wage, do you survey the current wage of someone before they enter the program and then after they exit the program? Because this is for the incumbent piece. I think it's probably makes a lot of sense to look at the change in wage for an individual. And I don't think I didn't see it anywhere in here to measure the before and the after when someone is employed and they have a change. They've been basically educated or skilled up and then employed.
Thank you for the question, Stacy Bostwick. For the record, we haven't actually used this part of the statute to do a project. We wanted just to make sure that we had the protection and the expectation in statute. So I appreciate the suggestion, and I'll be writing that down because I think that's excellent. And we always we collect performance information on the back end for all of our projects, and part of that is wages. But just through nature of some of our projects that have been a little bit longer term, we want to make sure that we've been able to capture those promotions. And so as a probably our shining example, we had an individual who worked TMCC, who was unemployed and was able to get a job at Tesla as a result of going through the manufacturing program there. Started out at $18 an hour and was since promoted and is making $50 an hour, and that in that short time frame. And so we really want to capture those pieces. So we already were seeing that as a trend, but I like formalizing that for our incumbent worker. Thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that data is really important, and for all comers, not ones that are just moving within the same business, but also for those who either haven't been employed or have been employed at a low wage in a low wage job and now have the opportunity to have a much higher wage. So I think putting that in statute for both incumbent and non-incumbent workers would make a lot of sense. And then in looking at, I think it's Section 2, where you talk about equipment, it's page 5 on my copy. You've got in maybe it's 2, number 7 and 8, you now can use money to purchase equipment, but it looks like you basically have a clawback provision so that you may recapture the equipment. And I think that makes some sense because we don't want organizations or entities to spend a lot of money on equipment and thinking this is kind of the way to get equipment. So I appreciate you've got a clawback on that. But also, there doesn't seem to be any limitations in current statute, and you haven't added any for sort of your overhead charges. So again, in Section 2, when you get down into B, C, D, E, F, some of the more administrative pieces of this program, I'm not sure if you have analyzed and would look at setting a max that you can actually use for overhead and administration versus the training itself. And then the last thing that I have is in Section 2.4, it talks about 2.4, maybe it's number 2. They use the term debarred. It is not excluded from receiving contracts from the federal government as a result of being debarred. I just want to know what debarred means in this bill.
Thank you, Stacy Bostwick, for the record, through the chair. So the nomenclature around debarred is at the federal level, and so businesses through their own actions can be, debarred from receiving federal funds. And we see that a lot in the workforce, not a lot, but we see that in the workforce space as a protection when you're working with employers. So if they were a beneficiary of workforce development dollars as a business and through their own actions took advantage, committed fraud, or those kinds of nature, they end up on that list. It's a short due diligence check, and it encompasses businesses who typically utilize or take advantage of workforce development programs.
Is that information readily available?
Yes, it's online. Stacy Bostrick for the record.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Members, any additional questions? Okay, so I have a couple. So I wanted to follow up on a question that Senator Severs-Gansert asked on the equipment. So in the equipment for the recapture and repurpose, so is this going to be some kind of security interest that you maintain where a document is signed between the business and the WIN program? And is there going to be an issue about them keeping the equipment in a certain condition, being that it's subject to recapture and ability to be repurposed into another program?
Chair, thank you for the question, Stacy Bostwick, for the record. So educational providers are the ones who are typically going to be the recipients, right? All of the WIN funds go to educational partners to develop the talent, right, for those industry partners. And so they have an expectation in terms of process of maintaining an inventory. They have to obviously identify where those things are located. It's a process they go through annually. What we wanted to be clear on was that at the end of an agreement, there was nothing in place to say, do they keep it? Do they request it? How does that look? And they could honestly tell us, we don't want it. And there was nothing there to kind of say, what should we do with that? So we want to be clear that in this situation where if the program doesn't need the equipment, I can't imagine that being the case, or doesn't want it, or unfortunately, maybe a program didn't launch successfully. But we've made this investment, we have this equipment, that we have that recapture clause to bring that back. So we have steps in place to identify it and in terms of who funded it and where it would go and come back. They have to share that information. That's already part of our process. I think that covers the bases unless there's something else that we should add.
No, that was it. And then I have another question on I guess it's cooperation. So for the provide post-secondary and industry recognized credentials, when I read that section in the bill, number one, I was wondering the crossover to Owen, right? Because I know that they were focused on very specific credentials and they had a huge list of making sure that some of the workforce were tied to credentialing, also higher ed degrees, AA, BA, etc. What's the relationship there? And then the second part to that, what is the interaction with workforce connections? Because there seems to be some duplication of things that you're asking for here that I know that Workforce Connections is doing in their business development offices.
Chair, Stacy Bostrick for the record. So I'm aware of the Owen list of credentials as well. I think that gives us a good foundation of the types of credentials, but the real intent with having that language is that we want to make sure that the training programs that we're helping through investing in developing are delivering skills that are transferable, that mean something, ideally to more than one employer, and that we're not getting into the space of training someone how to be an employee for X, Y, or Z company, that we're giving them those transferable skills. And obviously, the way that we kind of talk about that in a skills-based economy is just what is something that is meaningful within this industry. And so even just a simple resource map, if you want to look at it that way, a mapping exercise of saying in this industry, in Nevada or in kind of our region, what are the types of credentials or skills or those kinds of things that are recognized, or what are they seeking? And we have access to that kind of data that we can just do a quick search and occupational snapshot just to make sure that we're lining things up. It is entirely possible that we're working with an employer who looks at their skill stuff differently, and we still want to be open to those conversations, but we do not want to get into a space where we're getting outside of skills. So we really want to be laser focused. The second piece of that question, I don't know if we have overlap. We try to be very careful in terms of our where we focus. And so the way that I always kind of like to explain the way that WIN works is, and it's probably not the best analogy in the world, but we have an amazing workforce system with a lot of different resources, but they can't enable people to go to a training program if the training program doesn't exist. So we kind of, I guess, create the ship for people to get into and to go down that path or support that with our educational providers. On the flip side, I guess, on the business development side, I think I don't know, there's been many projects. Projects come to us in a lot of different ways. They come to us through kind of partnerships. And, I work regularly with Workforce Connections in Nevada Works in the North, partnership with Dieter, obviously with Owen and the RDAs and that system to kind of look at what's happening within the system. And quite frankly, to make sure that, companies aren't necessarily double dipping or we're not duplicating. But what WIN does is unique in its space. Dieter can't do what WIN does. Workforce Connections can definitely engage with the business, and they could have conversations about the services that they have funding to do. Someone goes through a training program that gets them a certain credential, and when they come to that job, the employer's like, you know what, I just need like 8 more hours of on-the-job training. Then they can leverage those dollars that Workforce Connections does for the on-the-job piece that might be missing. But they would need all of that foundational training to get to that point. And so that's really what WIN's focus is, getting those programs that give people the opportunity for those jobs, especially when we're talking about infrastructure gaps, filling in these spaces where we have jobs, but we don't have training programs to fill that pipeline. I hope that answers that.
It does. And now I just want to get into a broader question. Because I was looking at the last report. I don't know if I know what you put up, but on the actual WIN, GoEd's website, when you go to WIN, the report is offset, I think roughly, it's that 2-year window. So I have a couple of questions on that data, because Multi-NOAA Academy, there was a $460,000 investment, but there was no indication that there were any jobs or any training that went with that $460,000. In addition, when I looked up College of Southern Nevada manufacturing skills program, there were, I believe it was either there was 12 or 17 trained. I think it was 12, 8 employed, but yet there was a $1.1 million investment. In my mind, I was just like, okay, so what happened to the other folks who went through the training who weren't employed? Then when I looked up the advanced manufacturing for it was the Western Nevada College, there were 22 trained and no jobs. And then there was $157,000 invested. And so I was just like, okay, what's going on in the space? So I'm asking this question because I'm trying to clarify, is this bill trying to help you actually get outcomes? Because based on the current data that was on the website, there is no actual job at the end of this training, which has been a historical issue that's been going on in Nevada. And what was even more worrisome was the SNAP pilot I believe it was Western Nevada. There were 42 trained, but then the data just said, well, it was $38,000 leverage. It was confusing because they only got $40,000. The question is, what happened to the 42 trained that were supposed to be a part of this low-income program to help them find employment? I didn't see an outcome of jobs listed in the data at all. And then on the Truckee Meadows reentry, I saw no jobs. And so I'm wondering, although I see this bill change, how are we getting at, actually making sure that the outcome of the money that's given translates actually into an employment?
Sharon, thank you for the question. So the biennial report that you were looking at online based on the data that you're sharing was the last biennial report. And so we can submit the current one, which has updated outcomes for all those programs that you're talking about for the record. We'd be happy to do that. So big picture, I wanted to kind of share a couple of things. The challenge with the biennial report is it's always kind of a snapshot, a point in time. And so it's a little bit difficult to kind of capture and to visualize, folks that are still in a training program versus those who have, graduated and are now in the kind of workforce pipeline, right? They finished their training. So that can be a little bit hard to capture. So, looking at the last biennial report, we've been able to say that nearly 2,000 people have entered training. And from there, from people, that have gone and started, we know minimally 861 people have obtained at least that first job through receiving those new skills. I think this kind of ties back to two potential pieces for discussion. The first one kind of being, and that's part of where some of the changes in the bill are coming from in terms of data. We want employers to know that we need data to help demonstrate the impact. And even though we have systems in place, like releases of information, it has been challenging, in my experience in the last, 2.5 years to collect information. And I understand from a human resources perspective, they're just the data sharing and privacy, there are concerns, about that. We just want them to kind of view this as we're in partnership together, and this kind of helps us tell the story. So that we can better articulate, because what we see on paper, we know to be true, like we know that there's greater value, but when we don't actually have validation of it, I'm kind of a data person in that way. I'm not going to tell you something I don't know to be true. And so, I always kind of think about the outcomes we're giving you as the baseline. It's only better than what we can tell you because we don't know, and we don't get that validation sometimes from some of the employers. The other piece of that is really with the way the reversion works, we've entered into certain projects and we have a hard stop on June 30th. That also means reporting stops June 30th. So if you have someone who graduates from the program on June 15th, if they don't get a job before June 30th, our educational partner has no obligation to share outcomes. And we obviously have good relationships with our educational providers. And so they're usually pretty good about kind of sharing and updating and helping me with the biennial report, but they're under no obligation because those contracts agreements, stop with the end of the biennium or reversion.
Okay, well, if the bill is going to fix it, great, because based on that report, I was just like, and what I saw in your slides, I didn't really see the outgrowth or the breakdown of those programs extended. So and we're all trying to get folks to a job at the end of the day, right? And for it actually be matched. So I appreciate the presentation. Members, are there any questions before I move into anyone that signed in for support of SB 24? Okay, seeing none. BPS, can you see if anybody is on the line for support of SB 24?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support of SB 24, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, to testify in support of SB 24, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 110. You have 2 minutes. Please spell and state your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Hugh Anderson, Anderson. I'm Managing Director of Hightower Las Vegas and Chairman of the Vegas Chamber's Government Affairs Committee. I'm also currently a member of the Governor's Workforce Development Board. I'm here today to express my support for Senate Bill 24, and I appreciate the proposal that has been brought forth by GOED. These provisions are essential to our economic recovery and workforce. The most vulnerable of our workers have been hard hit on 3 separate occasions since the year 2000: 9/11, the Great Recession, and the pandemic. I applaud the fact this bill addresses the issue of training existing employees and training them in new skill sets. Economic turmoil is an indicator of a new emerging economy, and many of our workers are not properly prepared for that future economy. This training in new skills will be vital as we emerge from the pandemic, since we will need to help displaced workers identify new career opportunities and get them back in the workforce with greater financial security going forward. The Vegas Chamber has also undertaken a new workforce development initiative to help address these concerns called Southern Nevada Workforce Solutions. This enterprise will focus on making it easy for displaced workers to find a job, but a career and a brighter future. They'll be able to easily find skills and aptitude assessment, institutions that provide courses and training, and where the financial resources are. A Netflix for job seekers, if you will. It will assist displaced employees with new career paths that they may not even be aware of and connect them with the resources they need to achieve a better future. I think this is an excellent example of public and private effort being aligned. Thank you for your consideration, and I ask you to support Senate Bill 24 as we work together to rebuild Nevada together.
Thank you, caller.
Again, if you have just entered the call, we are speaking in support of SB 24. If you would like to speak in support of SB 24, please press *9 now to enter the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 469. Please state and spell your name for the records. You have 2 minutes. You may begin. Again, caller with the last 3 digits, 469. You have 2 minutes. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon. This is Nate McKinnon, MacKinnon, Vice Chancellor for Community Colleges at the Nevada System of Higher Education. On behalf of the Nevada System of Higher Education and our 4 community colleges, it's with great pleasure that I come today to speak in support of this bill. The WIN Fund has been incredibly important to our efforts in helping to diversify Nevada's economy by upskilling displaced workers, by ensuring that current workers have opportunities to upskill, preventing the need to import talent from outside of the state. Our community colleges have had a great partnership with the Governor's Office of Economic Development, Businesses, and Industry to provide the training that they need for employees. We really appreciate all of the work that GOED's done in partnership with our community colleges and look forward to a continued partnership moving forward. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, caller. EPS, is anyone else on the line?
Yes, Chair. Caller with the last 3 digits, 131. You have 2 minutes. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Chair Neal and members of the Committee on Revenue and Economic Development, my name is Connor Kane, CONNORCAIN, and I'm testifying today on behalf of LVGEA in support of Senate Bill 24. For many of the reasons that Director Brown covered in his economic development presentation, the Workforce Innovations for a New Nevada Account, or WIN Fund, is one of the best tools that we have for economic development in Southern Nevada. As Ms. Bostwick mentioned, Haas Automation's partnership with the College of Southern Nevada is a great example of this. We frankly support any changes to strengthen the WIN Fund and appreciate Director Brown's leadership on this topic. We thank you for your time and encourage your support of Senate Bill 24.
Thank you for that. Next.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 150. Please state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Patty Charlton, last name CHARLTON. Good afternoon, Chair Neal and members of the committee. I'm the Vice President and Provost of the Henderson campus of the College of Southern Nevada. On behalf of the college, we are in support of SB 24 and specifically the revisions that were outlined by Ms. Bostwick. CSN is very grateful and appreciate the work and great collaboration that we've had with the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and we've been beneficiaries of the WIN funds and recently received $1.8 million in this past year. The WIN funds have allowed us to establish and scale workforce training programs for high-demand industries such as manufacturing, as you've heard, healthcare, information technology, distribution and logistics, the skilled trades, all within our CSN Strategic Workforce Plan of key industries. The WIN funds have provided us the resources for capacity building to meet the training needs of a ready and qualified workforce. Additionally, I want to also highlight our support for the interpretation of the bill that allows for that non-reversion language that Ms. Boswick spoke of. This non-reversion language provides us the flexibility to continue to work on projects without the biennium hard stop and reversion of those funds back to the general fund. For example, the non-reversion language gives us flexibility in the areas where we find some supply chain delays, curriculum development, and facility redesign that may be necessary to support these new industries. Thank you for your time, your consideration today, and for your support of SB 24. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There are no more callers in support of SB 24 at this time.
Okay, so we will move to opposition. Is anyone calling in opposition to SB 24?
If you would like to testify in opposition to SB 24, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to testify in opposition to SB 24, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Thank you, Chair. There are no callers in the queue to speak in opposition to SB 24 at this time.
Okay, so we will move to neutral. Is anyone calling in to testify neutral on SB 24?
If you would like to speak in neutral testimony to SB 24, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 120. You have 2 minutes. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Stephen Cohen for the record. Stephen with a V. Cohen as in the Assemblywoman, but no known relation that we're familiar with. Just wanted to address a point that the governor made in his State of the State in a policy context. He committed to $75 million for workforce development. But the one bucket of folks that have long been constrained in the workforce development context are folks with disabilities. For example, federal law has been on the books since the late 30s, known as Section 14C. This allows selected employers that receive Department of Labor approval to, under a special certificate, pay their employees less than the minimum, federal and or state minimum wage. In addition, about a half dozen years ago, the federal government went from the Workforce Investment Act, or WIA, to the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act, or WIOA. Unfortunately, the administrative burdens that came with that change more recently have far outweighed any benefits in terms of outcomes. So I would ask, and I'll be handling this again in the money committees when DETR presents their budget in early March, that a portion of that $75 million be allocated to projects and policies that advance opportunities for people with disabilities in our state. With that, Madam Chair, thank you, and I yield.
Thank you for your testimony. DPS, is anyone else signed in neutral?
No, Chair. The public line is open and working. However, there are no more callers at this time.
Okay, thank you for that. Ms. Bostic, Director Brown, are there any closing comments?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. I look forward to working with you and members of the committee. I looked at this committee and realized the incredible breadth of experience that sits on this committee, and look forward to working with you this session.
Thank you. All right, we will close the hearing on SB 24, and we will open up for public comment.
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working. However, there are no other callers at the time.
Okay, we'll give it 30 seconds. Okay, seeing no one signed in for public comment, this concludes our business for today, and we will adjourn Senate Revenue and Economic Development.